Hello everyone, welcome you all to another episode on Azure On Air, and this is Ariel Literacy, the lead product consultant of Serverless 360, an advanced cloud management platform for Azure. Today I have an very encouraging guest, Henry. And Henry works as an independent DevOps and Azure architect in the Netherlands region. He enjoys sharing his knowledge, Azure knowledge, to the community through various platforms like speaking at conferences, writing blogs. In fact, he writes a book on his own. And here I have Henry for you all. Welcome you, Henry.
Cloud has some, for example, the inherent property of elasticity, that we want to be able to quickly create resources or remove them when we don't need them anymore because we're only paying for what we're creating. Some people think it's wise to organize all the infrastructure as code together in a single repository and have then pipelines connected to that repository to deploy the infrastructure. Thank you so much, Isai. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So, Henry, I know you have a lot of expertise in building infrastructure as code services. Like, how is this significant in day-to-day business? Enable us on this topic, please.
Oh, I don't know about a lot of expertise, but I have been doing it, I think, for about 8 years or so now, in 4 or 5 different companies. And I think the take is
Awesome.
very simple that I have. You can't go without.
Mm-hmm.
If I, at least when I look at developing cloud software that runs on infrastructure that you can manage through infrastructure as code, things like Azure resources, but also AWS, GCP, etc. I think infrastructure as code is the only way that we should be creating and deploying infrastructure into our production environments. No more manual touchy touch.
Exactly. Yes. So, do am I correct in understanding that by adopting to infrastructure as code, we can cut off a lot of manual errors and manual overheads in replicating an environment from, say, for example, from non-production to production? Is this something that is relevant, Henry? Is my assumption correct?
I think you are. If I go back to I think my first or second year as a developer, I worked at a company that created bookkeeping software. It was a great company to work at, and we started creating not just a local client but also our first cloud software. And once that became a little bit bigger and bigger, the deployment, which we were still doing manually, as well as the maintaining of the infrastructure, um, became quite a, how do you say that politely, pain in the backside. And because everything that you did on your test environment, you had to write down step by step what you did. And then when you went to go to production with the new changes, you had to go into the production environment and you had to do precisely the same thing once over as you did a week ago in your test environment. Now, while computers are very, very good at doing the same thing over and over again without mistakes, we humans are not. If you ask 10 persons to do the same thing from instructions, they're probably going to do it in 8 different ways. Even if you ask just me to do the same thing twice with 2 weeks in between, I'm probably not going to be very good at repeating the same actions. And that makes that we get differences between test and production, and that we get different behavior on test as we get on production, which is not a thing that we want. Now, codifying our infrastructure using either ARM templates and Bicep, but maybe even using scripts, we completely get that error out of the way. So, yes, your assumption is correct, I believe.
Absolutely. And am I correct in understanding that these infrastructure as a code helps me build the cloud native systems with absolutely like as we spoke with less of errors and reducing the configuration overhead. So is this something best suited for cloud native systems?
I think in theory, you can apply infrastructure as code to any environment that you deploy to. Um, just as we have done management of the configuration inside VMs using things like Ansible, there is nothing holding you back from building a system on prem that you can manage using infrastructure as code.
For our customers to experience the product, they need a basic integration up and running in place for them to manage that using serverless 360. So how do we utilize like enable them is by giving them a terraform script which will help them bring up and cloud integration, a basic enterprise integration application up and running that comprises of various Azure services. So this is where I can connect my exposure to infrastructure as a code, Henry.
Well, that sounds wonderful. I think infrastructure as code is indeed a way for enabling customers to quickly spin up the resources that you need without you having to go, into their environment to do it for them. Just give them the EIC and of IAC, I have to say, and they can do the rest themselves.
Absolutely. So, can you throw a bit more light on how, as a team, you can organize infrastructure as a code along with the pipelines as a code and C sharp code to deliver applications for your customers? Can you throw a bit more light into this space, Henry?
That's actually a good question that I get quite a lot. There are different ways you can do it. Some people think it's wise to organize all the infrastructure as code together in a single repository and have then pipelines connected to that repository to deploy the infrastructure. And then they have different pipelines connected to the code or code repositories to deploy the code onto that infrastructure. Um, Personally, I have a little bit of a different take. I like this idea of splitting my application into different distinct components, where the definition of a component is the thing that I deploy separately. And then all the things related to that one component go into a single repository. So that's going to be the C sharp code, it's going to be my infrastructure as code definitions, it might be the description of my monitoring templates, and also the code for my pipelines, because I'm also a fan of pipeline as codes. All of that goes into a single repository. And then ideally, I want to have just a single pipeline coming from that repository to deploy things into the different environments. One very long pipeline that first compiles it, freezes the templates, does some unit testing, deploys to test, runs some more tests, maybe deploys to a staging slot, does a spot check, and then finally deploys it to production. Maybe with the correct approvals in place. So I like this philosophy of one repository, one pipeline, one deployment target. Just so slicing my code base, so to say, per component. That's an approach I take, and it has worked really well so far for us.
I agree. I completely agree. In fact, even for serverless 360, we have a similar approach, and I can't agree more on with you on this. And when I look at your experience, Henry, you have wide experience across different roles. You have played various roles with multiple organizations. So, can you share your experience with one of the favorite roles that you have played till now?
One of the favorite roles, um, and maybe a bit unexpected. Besides the larger gigs that I've done, I also provide training or workshops occasionally. Um, and I think those are one of the fun things I do because you get to go to people that
Awesome.
want to learn something. So right from the start, we have something in common. Often they are eager because otherwise they wouldn't have been there.
Very
Um,
true.
and you get a day to spend with them to teach them about something that I'm passionate about, that they are looking to learn. And it's a great way to just step out of my own work for a while and also take
Yeah.
a look at the problems that other people are dealing with and learn from them as well. So that's, I think, one of the things that I enjoy the most.
Very true, very true. I enjoy sharing my knowledge through community events, and I can completely correlate. How does it feel like? Like when we share our knowledge, it's mutually learning back as well. So it's been an like that I can completely understand how much you enjoy being sharing your knowledge with the community, being a trainer.
And it
Awesome.
goes back and forth, right?
Yeah.
Because
Mm,
when I work, I build experience that I can use for teaching, and
mm,
when I teach, I get questions that I don't know the answer to, so
true.
I can learn new things. And for me, so that builds like a circle. And
Yeah,
I think the best training comes from experience, not just from theory. I
absolutely.
hope it also helps my customers to get better trainings.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. I agree. Talking about your book, Henry, and I'm sure a lot of your experiences would be accumulated in the book. And tell us more about your book. How did you get a trigger to put down your experiences into a book? Where did it all start?
This book, this is the second book that I participated in. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
write it alone, by the way. I wrote it together with two close friends
Mm.
and people I've worked with in the past, Eduard
Mm-hmm.
Kelholz and Erwin Staal.
Mm-hmm.
And this book started when I was working on my previous book, and
Mm-hmm.
of course, when you write a book, you go through this thing like, oh, this is amazing, and then somewhere about a third, it feels like this is never going to get done, and then you're going through half a year of pain, and then slowly towards the end, you feel a little bit better about yourself. But at some point, I promised myself to never write a book again. And then I finally finished the first book and I had it in my hands. And right at that spot, I got an email from Manning saying, would you like to write us a book about infrastructure as code? And I looked at the book in my hands and said, of course, this is fucking awesome. So going back to the thing that I promised myself. And then I thought, oh no, what did I do? Why did I say yes? And then I asked Erin and Eduard to help me. So that because what that's one of the things that I learned from my previous book, even though Mike wrote a chapter, the remainder of the book I had to write alone. And working alone is not for me. I enjoy working in a team. And so I'm really happy that I got Eduard and Aaron on board and that we finished the book together in the last year and a half. So that's the story.
Awesome. That's the story. How did it all start? And now, coming to the second half of the story, what can we expect from this book, and who is the right target audience to read this book?
The target audience, I think, is everyone who is working on the Azure cloud and is in some way responsible for deploying stuff, let's call it stuff, into Azure. So either if that can either be like I'm a network engineer and I have to manage virtual networks, I'm a security engineer, I have to manage policies and the configuration of resources. I want to be able to review that. Or somebody in an application team which has to manage their own infrastructure for the component or components they are running. So I think every engineer that touches on Azure. Now, what to expect from the book? This book is called Azure Infrastructure as Code with ARM templates and Bicep. And that's because we have taken the conscious choice to only write about the native infrastructure as code capabilities of Azure. ARM templates, a Bicep, Azure policy, deployment stacks. There's a little bit in them in there about that as well, even though it's not in public preview yet. There is stuff in about Bicep registries. I think the full ecosystem that you can use natively on Azure is in there. That also means that the big competitor, let's call it that, Terraform, is not covered because that's not a native tool. So if you
Yeah.
are working solely with Azure, I think this book is a really good approach to getting started because the native tools are more simpler to start with than Terraform. If you have requirements that really require you to do more than that, it's still a good foundation, but it might be that you need more later on.
So we can
If
look for it in your upcoming book. And this book is also available in as an ebook. So we are going to share the URL with for the listeners to grab an ebook right from here in the description of this podcast. Yeah,
all right, thank you.
awesome. So, Henry, I see that you play multiple roles, and now being an independent solution architect, you might be working with multiple customers at the same point in time, right? How do you differentiate your role as a full time employee and as an independent consultant now? How is it different?
You mean when the two compare the two? Whew.
Compare the two.
I don't know really because The engagements that I do, often I have
Mm-hmm.
one like big client at a time that
Hmm.
takes somewhere
Hmm.
between 3 or 5 days a week. And
Hmm.
that's very comparable to being a full-time employee.
Okay.
Well, I do have more freedom. Things like if I want to go away for a day, or if I want to start a little bit later, which I like to do,
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
and then work a little bit later as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
there is a little bit more freedom.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
I still, because I'm longer with a client and I'm there for multiple days, I still strongly identify with the product and the thing we want to achieve. It's not
Mm-hmm.
easier to stop at 5 than it was when I was an FTE.
True. Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Um, Sometimes it feels like people just a little bit more easily listen to you because
Mm-hmm.
you're external and temporary, and you have
Hmm.
just been coming in from another company or another gig. Well, as an
Mm-hmm.
FTE, people know you for a longer time, and it's like, yeah,
Hmm.
you always say that. Um, and of course, what I had once, that when the job was done, that I
Mm-hmm.
came in to do, and they wanted
Hmm.
to me to do something else as well, I just could
Hmm.
say, I'm sorry, no, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to
Hmm.
move on to another gig right now. And for
Hmm.
post recording, we have to cut this part out because my headset just stopped. So I need to switch on my other headset before I can hear you again. 1 second, please.
Yeah, sure.
Asani?
Yeah. I can hear
Ye-
you, Henry? Can you?
yes, all right. I can hear you again as well. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah. No problem. We can understand.
All right, but I'm ready to go again.
Yeah. Sure. So are you done with that response, or should we redo it? That's
No,
fine
I just
if you
kept
want to.
talking while I couldn't hear you anymore. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm done.
Okay, okay, that's awesome. Yeah. So I would like to know, Henry. You sound to be a really busy person. As you said, sometimes you might have to start early and then finish late. How do you keep up your health when you are working most of the time at the desk? I think this would be a best tip for many of us.
So honestly, it is a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
People that have seen me can attest to the fact that I look like I am very very healthy, and that I eat enough. But what I try to do is I try to run at least 3 times a week.
Oh wow.
Um, I said I try, right? That's not always working out. I've one very big motivator, or actually two. The first one and the biggest one is that I do together with my wife. So it is
Mm-hmm.
something that we do together. Sometimes we run
Okay.
separately, but at least every week we go together once into the
Mm,
forest.
mm, mm,
Take it
mm,
easy, take the time. So
mm,
you're really doing something together. That's fun.
mm. Yeah.
Um, and the other one is that every year together we also run half a marathon. I live
Mm.
on a small island of Texel, which is
Mm-hmm.
part of the Netherlands. And
Mm-hmm.
then every year there is half a marathon here.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get on the boat with about 1,500 people. Then the ferry
Mm-hmm.
goes to Den Helder and then back to the island. And
Mm-hmm.
then the second it docks, it sounds its horn, and that's the start of the
Mm-hmm.
run. And then you have to run
Mm-hmm.
to the central village. So that's my motivator to keep training, because you can't run half a marathon
Mm.
without any
Mm-hmm.
training. So that's
Okay.
what I try to do, and I cheat a little bit.
Mm.
Sometimes I start a little bit early, and then halfway the day I go for a bike,
Mm.
or halfway the day I go for a
Mm.
run. Just break your day into different parts, and move a little bit in between. Someone I just
So.
heard a great quote once, which
Mm-hmm.
said, "Everybody has to walk for at least half an hour each day,
Very true.
unless you're very
Mm.
busy. Then you have to walk
Mm.
for an hour." Um,
Mm.
which illustrates the point that we need to downtime. We
Walk.
need to relax. We need time to collect our thoughts and do nothing. Be pointless for a bit.
Very true. Very true. That's very much necessary that we refresh our brain for some time so that we can come back with that power. And you know what, Henry, the way you have put forth your response itself has given us a refreshment and motivation to ensure that we strike a balance at work and life. So that's a great advice for all those who spend most of our time at the desk. Make sure that you cut off your day, spend some time to refresh yourself, and then walk every day, as Henry says. Awesome it is. So, Henry, to our listeners, so we have come to an end of our podcast. Thanks for sharing a lot of insights, both on the technical side as well as on the personal front. And then, how do we end this podcast? Is with our guests' insight for the young audience who are listening to this podcast. Like, if they are getting started with Azure, what is your advice for them? How should they get on with this journey as Azure evolves?
How to start? Um,
Or do you want me to rephrase the question, Henry?
no. It's a good question. I'm just thinking of an
Okay.
appropriate answer. I think that the first thing I would say is don't be afraid.
Very true.
Um,
Yeah, that's nice.
when I look at how developers try new things, there are two approaches. The first one is just looking at something and then thinking, what if I click this button? What might happen? Or how would this work? Let me try to reason about it. Their hands are not on the keyboard. They're trying to build something in their mind about what might happen. And the other approach is that people just do something and see what happens. So they give a stimuli to the thing they're studying and then seeing what happens. They get their hands on the keyboard, they try things, and then they say, "Ooh, that wasn't a good idea," and then they laugh and then they carry on. I would encourage everybody to try the second approach. Don't look at that blanking cursor. Just do something. Try it. See what happens
That's a great motivation. Yes, get
and
your
learn
hands
from that.
dirty. Exactly. Try it out. Even if we fail, we have a great learning waiting for us.
Yes, and do that by creating pet projects. And I don't necessarily mean do open source and work in the evenings to show how smart you are. I'm not encouraging that, but at your work, if you have to study something, file new project, try things there, and then apply them in your real code base.
Exactly. That's a great advice, Henry. So I'm sure the last few minutes have been really helpful and really interesting. I didn't realize that we have been talking for more than 20 minutes now. It's a great session, Henry. Thanks for your time and sharing your experience and valuable thoughts with us. Thank you so much.
Cove.co